Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. Welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first encounter. This is my first time coming out about this encounter. I wanted to forget about it, but this memory found its way back into my head. Just thinking about this makes my skin crawl and sends me into a state of paranoia. I made an account just to get this off of my chest and maybe to meet other people that had a similar experience. I came across a tweet yesterday. My friend was on a trip to Gallup, New Mexico, to see her grandmother. For some reason, it brought up some disturbing memories of a recent trip with my dad. It was the summer of last year. I had just graduated from college and saved up enough money for my dad, my younger brother, and I to do a dream road trip down Route 66. We live in LA, so we figured we would start there and make our way up to Route 66 and see how far we could go. The first few days of the trip was great. Nothing weird or bad happened. We stopped at Hallbrook and tried to stay at the Wigwam Motel, but unfortunately it was all booked. My dad and I made the decision to drive up to Gallup, since it was about 3 to 4 hour drive from where we were. So we hopped in the car and began our drive to Albuquerque. I was driving since my dad had been driving all day. He slept in the passenger seat while my younger brother sat in the back counting the cars as we passed. It was around 1 in the morning and the road seemed awfully empty. I'm not sure if it was normal or not, but it didn't feel right to me. While I was driving, I saw a very large dog walking on the road ahead of us. It was just trotting, minding its own business. I was able to slow down a bit before we could really get close to it. I figured if I got a little closer, it would get scared, run off to the side of the road so I could continue. But it didn't. It just kept trotting, not picking up speed, not even the slightest hint. I got a little closer, and I began to notice how long and skinny its legs were. Its fur was black, but you could see the dried-up mud clumps in its coat. My brother looked forward, altering, noticing how slow we were going. "Why are you going so slow?" he asked. "'Cause there's a big-ass dog in front of us, and it won't move," I said, a bit irritated at the situation. "The honk so he can move," he said, and before I could stop him, he led over and honked the horn himself. The large animal turned around and ran off to the side of the road. But in a split second that it turned around, which felt like 10 minutes, I saw its face. It was a human face, but its snout looked a lot longer and normal human, but shorter than a dog's. Its eyes were red, but reflected in the headlights like an animal's eyes should. As it snarled, a row of canine teeth were visible. My stomach felt twisted and my heart stopped. Once it was off the road, I stepped on the gas and started to haul ass. The sudden gasp pushed my brother back, who also saw what I had just did, and had a loss of words. He must have looked out the left window because I heard him scream and looked to my left to see the thing running on the side of our car. We made eye contact, and his jaw was open. It let out this unearthly cry before ramming its body into the car. Its sudden weight almost made the car go off the road and crash. Luckily, I was able to hold us steady. My dad woke up by that time. He heard my brother scream. He saw it as well. "Drive!" he yelled. I am, I shouted. I looked back in the mirrors and off to the side to see if it was still following us. I could see its figure slowly fading into the darkness behind, but I would be an idiot if I tried to slow down. Eventually, we were pulled over by a cop. We told him what had happened, and he seemed to be scared himself, because he let us go with a warning, and was kind enough to escort us as far as he could to make sure we were safe. We were able to get a motel, but we couldn't sleep. I'll never forget that thing's face, how haunting it was. The rest of the trip was okay after that, nothing weird. We managed to reach Missouri before going back home to L.A. My dad and my brother never talked about it because we knew what it was. Before my mother died a couple years back, she used to tell us folklore stories of her Navajo people. The skinwalker was one of those stories. She told me once and then never again. She did so as a warning. If I ever did see one, I never thought it would be on that trip. Today's second encounter. It was just a camping trip on a beautiful autumn afternoon in 1994 when Humph states, beginning the story of his encounter with a creature that seemed to stumble straight out of a world of nightmares. Not an ordinary animal, not even like a Sasquatch, something weirder. It was Labor Day weekend, and I arrived at the campsite on Friday. I could tell right away that this was going to be a good trip, because one of the members of our camping party brought his big boat. This vessel was a 25-footer, with all the fishing gear a man could use on a big lake. The lake they call Gitche-Gumee, in the land of Hiawatha, Lake Superior. He brought downriggers, water skis, and a state-of-the-art fish finder. We were camping at the Black River Harbor campsite, about 1/8 of a mile south of Lake Superior in northern Michigan. There were about 10 of us camping out there, and we were ready to have a good time. As the night crept in, the wind began to pick up just a little bit, and the creatures of the nocturnal realm began their nightly rituals, their instinctual song and dance. After all, this was no man's land, as Bob Seger puts it. The trees were glowing red and orange in the heights as I gazed up into the heavens. It was the clamber of a fire mixed with the autumn colors and the warm summer breeze that gave me a warm and comforting feeling of my surroundings. As the night settled in, one by one the camping crew nestled into their sleeping canopies. A few stayed up drinking beer, fueling the fire, and enjoying the Indian summer that had been gifted to the land we encroached upon. It was truly a feeling of being in tune with nature on this fine Saturday morning. As everyone else began getting up early for the start of the fishing tournament on the big lake, I was ready for a nap along with a few others. When I awoke a little later, there were only a few people remaining at the campsite. By now, others were just pulling in. A couple of us volunteered to make some grub for the crew, brats, burgers, and pork and beans sizzling over the campfire. It was the staple for the day. The rest of the crew were out fishing on the boat. Now it was late in the evening, and Steve C., the boat owner, and his crew came in from the lake. He had left the boat moored in the harbor. They had strung the day's catch of lake trout and coho salmon on the embankment to show their prize. They weren't trophy size, but plenty big for the next day's smorgasbord. This had been a long day for me, so it was night time for me. I was awoken at about 2 a.m. by one of the campers who told me that he needed a couple of volunteers to go in town for a cigarette run. Everyone else had been drinking and couldn't drive into town as it was miles away. I got up and grabbed some campfire molasses coffee, still sitting by the fire, and gulped it down. Wayne said he would make the cigarette run, and I offered to go along with him for company. I jumped into Wayne's LeSabre, and we were off heading to town. The night was a little breezy with a warm southern front, partly cloudy skies cluttering up the stars. It was a nice night. As we drove on about a mile or so, we saw something in the distance on the road ahead. Its eyes reflected back at us. Wayne kept driving, but had started to slow down when we noticed it was a raccoon running around in circles in the middle of the road. He slowed down a bit more, thinking the raccoon would just scare and run off. It was at this point that something else had focused our attention so sharply that it sent chills up my spine. By now we were traveling at a walking speed, and we were about 20 yards away from the raccoon. The animal acted like it was hypnotized into a circular pattern, as if it was chasing its tail. But this was not my concern right now. It was this other thing, this creature standing on the side of the road, that had my full and sober attention. As we approached into closer range, it turned its attention from the raccoon to us. At this point, my brain could not fathom what was being transmitted into it. It was a state of shock. I had slipped into the 3F syndrome: fight, flight, or freeze. I was definitely frozen from head to toe, and the hairs on my body were protruding through my clothing. There was this thing standing on 2 legs, standing like a human. It had the biggest glowing eyes unimaginably. The eyes were illuminated so bizarrely with unexplainably bluish-green colors, yellow and orange, and these colors were changing like those of a chameleon. They also resembled that matted eye pattern of a wasp's eye. Now we were getting even closer. At the time, I was standing still. Together we both looked at each other and said the same exact words, as if we were both seeing things. What the fuck is that? With the car approaching at a crawl, we crept on. What was now standing 3 or 4 feet away from my passenger window rolled down. It was standing at the edge of the shoulder, I'd say about 5 feet away from me. As I was looking out my passenger window, I was terrified that it might grab me through my open window, but I was paralyzed, but so close that I had a good look at it. It had thin, stick-like arms. At the end of each were 3 or 4 fingers. This was a 2-legged bipedal thing standing about 5 feet tall. The weeds came almost up to its knees, so I didn't see its feet. It was not a big animal. It was brownish skin with a little bit of black hair, not a lot. Its eyes kept changing color, and at the point that it was standing aside of us, its eyes burned a fiery red. It looked like the devil himself, Wayne said. It was just so hideous looking. The car lights were not on it anymore as we started passing it, yet its eyes were still glowing. To me, this creature had the face that resembled a deranged kangaroo, only it was so evil-looking that I hesitate to say that it was a creature from this planet. So unearthly was this creature that my mind had processed that fact that this living thing was staring right through me, both aggressively and curiously, and that it could take my soul if it wanted. As we passed the thing, my eyes followed it, and it was photographically imprinted right into my brain that this was nothing that could even possibly have come from this planet. Wayne freaked and floored the gas pedal until he assumed we were a safe distance away, or I guess until I told him to slow the car down. We drove on into town in silence, collecting our thoughts. Only after we picked up the cigarettes and headed back to camp did we start to discuss what we had seen. We both came to the conclusion that it was a real experience, and very real in our minds, that this was so unearthly. Then came the question, do we tell the others what we had seen or keep it a secret? Who would believe us? They would say we were drunk or on dope, or that it was just a bear or something of that sort. Here's a fine example of trying to explain to people the unexplainable. Wayne and I both told everyone at camp, but our encounter with the thing from the land down under, as I named it, not surprisingly, only a few believers were impressed. Since then, I've told numerous people about the incident, but I came to the conclusion that I better watch who I tell, because they will think I'm full of it. So I say to you all out there, beware of these creatures from the land down under on those dark and lonely nights when you are out there in no man's land. They may be watching you. Very briefly, before we jump on into the other encounter, or encounters, the reason why he calls it the animal or creature from the land down under is because it resembled this deranged looking kangaroo, its face. This encounter did not take place in Australia. It took place by Lake Superior, as you guys have heard. Definitely a terrifying encounter. I think that this was possibly a Dogman. I think that there was maybe the light was reflecting its eyes. Maybe it was playing tricks with the guy's mind, but as he's side by side with this, it's looking like a deranged kangaroo and its eyes are fiery red. I don't know what else to think it is, but it's freaking terrifying, man. Wow. Today's third encounter. On January 12th, 2006, a witness walked into his home to find a devil-like creature confronting his 6-year-old Labrador dog. The creature seemed to be an unusual combination of a monkey, a dog, and the devil. Suddenly it sprang to its hind legs and ran, nearly pushing him over to get to the open door he had just come through. The creature had long fangs, a monkey-like tail, and extremely bright glowing eyes. In another report, an Ohio woman driving through Roanoke, Virginia at around 2:30 had a similar encounter in the late 90s while driving on a dark road at night, and was forced to take a detour due to road construction. She had driven past a road sign that read Red Wolf Crossing, close to Elizabeth City, when the creature, which was not a wolf, leapt in front of her car. The creature was all black, with a very short, sleek fur, pointed ears, and had a long, thin tail. She described it like cat-like, and yet not like any cat she had ever seen. The snout was flatter than a dog's and more like a cat's. The creature was very tall, because she saw it when it was standing on its hind legs, and it was easily over 6 feet. She indicates that its torso looked very much like a thin man. Its head resembled a large monkey, but with a pointed beard. However, the creature's hind legs were like a wild cat or dog. It was very muscular and thin. Later, the woman checked with the U.S. Game and Wildlife Department, who told her there were no black wolves in the area, but suggested that she had seen a feral dog or a wolf-dog hybrid. But the woman was emphatic that it was not a wolf or a dog. The The woman explained the creature may have been on all fours just before leaping. The creature leapt with such force and height that it only took one bound to make it across both lanes of the highway, which indicates the creature leapt more than 18 feet or 6 meters to get across the road. The dogs and wolves do not leap that far in one jump. Even larger animals such as deer usually take several bounds to leap across the road. These descriptions are somewhat similar to the infamous Dover Demon, which began at April 21st, 1977 in Dover, Massachusetts. Today's fourth encounter. Decades ago, my uncle and cousin each had an encounter on the same night. This was my uncle's encounter and one of my third or fourth cousins, although I've never spoken with my cousin about this. His account was only what my uncle has told me. This happened nearly 50 years ago, but my uncle still remembers it clearly. I'll provide a bit of info on the area and our family. We lived in the family farmhouse with my grandparents, the last house, on a dead-end country road. A small community of about 8 or 9 homes was referred by the locals as the Times River Siding, but really it had no official name. The name derived from the close-by station name sign of the CN Railroad. The road went out and met another road at the T intersection. To the right went over the tracks, then down through a ravine and out to the main country road. And to the left the road went through open fields for a mile or so, then turned 90 degrees and went over the next secondary country road, where it ended again very near to another ravine on the left side. Our family had a band started by my grandfather. He, my mom, uncle, and 2 cousins were in it. On this particular night, they had met for practice, which by 11 or 11:30 was winding down. Our one cousin left, and the reigning cousin helped my uncle tear down and put away the equipment, while my grandfather tended to the animals, which seemed very spooked and nervous, which really wasn't out of the ordinary, as there was a pack of wild dog that made their way through every so often for a few years back then. My cousin left and headed home. His way took him out to the left at the end of this road and over the next intersection is where he had the first of 2 encounters, but wouldn't become known for a few days. My uncle left 10 minutes or so after, and on his way home he took the right over the main country road. This particular night was either a full moon or nearly very full. As my uncle said, it was very bright. He crossed the tracks and went down through the ravine, and as he was approaching the stop sign, something in the field to his right caught his eye. There was something large and tall, standing sort of hunched forward and staring intently in his direction. This happened just as he was on his brake slowing down to a stop, but also starting to angle the car for the left-hand turn about to be made. His sight of the thing went from glancing to his right to over his shoulder, then to the rearview mirror as the car stopped. He sat staring for what seemed like hours, he said, but was only seconds. Then this thing broke into a sprint directly towards his car. My uncle said he was in a trance of disembodiment, like his brain couldn't comprehend what his eyes were seeing. The field isn't an overly large field, but still would be 400 to 500 yards between the tree line and the road, and this thing covered it fast. My uncle snapped out of his trance and peeled out of there as fast as he could, watching in the rearview mirror the whole time. This thing was close enough to be illuminated by the taillights, and it was reaching out for the car as he was peeling out. He said it ran on 2 feet, not on all fours, or even partly on a 4. 2 feet. It had dark-colored hair, either brown or black, appeared to have a muzzle similar to a dog, and had pointed ears on top of its head. Its eyes appeared to glow a dim yellowish orange. He said one strange thing that he felt was as if it wasn't looking at the car, but was looking at him inside the car. That was about as detailed as he could get, only seeing it briefly. He raced home and called back to the house and told them to lock the doors and stay inside. My grandfather asked why. My uncle said, "Just do it. I seen something in the field, but I'm not sure what it was. Just lock up and be safe." That was the last and only time he had seen anything like it. A few days later, at the next band practice, my uncle and cousin were sitting outside having a smoke, and my uncle told him about what he saw, expecting to be made fun of or called crazy. But instead, he said, "I seen something that night on my way home too." As he approached the stop, something ran across the road in front of him, making him hit the brakes and almost skid off the road. He said he only saw it for a split second as it was moving, but from what he could see of it, it looked like a massive dog or wolf, and it was standing upright on 2 legs. It could have been the way it seemed, or bound or jumped over the road. He more or less described the exact same thing my uncle had seen. Whatever it was, it covered a good 2 miles, which included navigating some dense wooded areas and a pretty steep-sided ravine in only a matter of 10 minutes at most, so it was fast. There are reports of strange noises like growls, howls, or barks in the woods along the Time River and around some of the farms in and around the time of these sightings. And he said there was some livestock found dead and partly eaten, but everyone tossed that up to wild dogs that were around the area at the time. But my uncle knows that that was no dog that he saw. No one else ever came forward having reported anything like this. Today's 5th encounter. I'm a bit spooked. I was driving in the woods at night with my dad. I live in the middle of the forest somewhat. We went down a long, dark road on Ontario, Canada, and suddenly saw a semi-low, tailless, earless, bony, elongated creature that reminded me of the shape of a starving human mixed with a hairless dog. It was so fast it was a blur. It had long fingers. Its skin was colored pale flesh. Same night we saw strange footprints outside of our house that were not recognizably as deer or moose. We both have plenty of time in the woods and recognized tracks. Never saw anything like it. Looked like a cloven hoof mixed with a humanoid-shaped print, and was fairly spread out and large. The foot pattern was like a V shape, and followed across our yard in the snow, but suddenly stopped and left a gap of no prints and continued again in the same line. We saw the same creature a year ago, and we often hear deep growls that are so loud they are as if a tree fell in the woods, and can be compared to a garbage disposal layered with a high-pitched trumpet, which occasionally clicking at our windows. My dad often sees glinting, gleaming eyes and sudden movement of some creature, followed by the same call. We have native burial grounds and reservations in the city and area I live. A lot of sightings and odd, unexplainable things, including a place where thousands of natives were tortured and killed. This particular area, people report being pushed, hearing deep growls and scratching noises, weird glinting eyes, and getting disoriented by sounds, wind movement, and even being pulled or separated with groups. People say they wind picks up and disorients, and they black out somewhat, as if they lose time, separate from friends, and wake up with it being pitch black at night. All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Guys, your support is what truly makes this channel so special. It is so appreciated, and it is what makes this channel continue to grow and go. So thank you. With that being said, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your children, your pets, your family, and friends. We know these creatures are real and out there. Share a little bit of information that we share on this channel on a daily basis with each other, and it may just save someone that you love's life someday. God bless you all.